Chapter 7 The Night of Apophis. Anubis awoke in Seteth's arms to a great rumbling sound, but it wasn't thunder. This was low and constant, as if the ground outside the cave was opening up. And just as she thought that, the entire cave began to shake. All the scarab beetles retreated into their little crevices. The entire cave was shaking. Seteth was sleeping through it. "Seth," Anubis said urgently. No response. She started shaking him. "Seteth!" Seth's eyes cracked open. "I'm so hungover," he mumbled. "No time for that. Listen," Anubis said. He was groggy, but there was definitely some sort of earthquake happening. Anubis kept expecting Seth to spring up like, "Oh my god, it's an earthquake." But that wasn't happening. Seth rolled over and scratched his butt. "For the love of God, Seth," Anubis just let out a tiny bit of her power slide through her fingers to burn Seteth's wrist. "Get the fuck up." That got him to bolt upright. "What the hell?" he asked, irate. He looked around and blinked his eyes. "Sounds like an earthquake." Anubis stood up and ran outside the cave. Sure enough, the world out there was literally falling apart. A great chasm had appeared where just before had been sand, and it was widening. Night had fallen and the moon was full. The sand dunes rolled and tumbled into the cavern, and the wind was blowing sand everywhere. Behind her, Seteth showed up, dragging his feet. "Do you have any coffee?" he asked sleepily. She just pointed at the chasm. "Oh shit," Seth said. "Apophis?" Anubis nodded. Apophis. The law. "Now I want you all to think. I want you to think long and hard," Jack Winehouse was shouting at a room full of cops. "Why you enforce the law." Ilion was there too, because he had liked Jack, and he knew how whatever was happening, Seteth was bound to be involved. Cleopatra was at his side, and the two of them were watching from a distance. The cops were all lined up, wearing chainmail, and they all had loaded handguns at their sides. "Why," Jack Winehouse said, "do you believe that it's important to follow the law?" Ilion rolled his eyes. "Why," Winehouse went on, his voice getting even louder, "do you believe that protecting mankind is important to you?" "This is kind of intense," Cleopatra whispered. Ilion nodded. "He's a wild dude." "And finally, when do you want to be remembered?" the police captain said. The cops were all standing at attention, eyeing their boss, thinking it all over. They'd been briefed on the situation, and the majority of them didn't believe it to be real. But they all trusted Jack, and they listened intently, some of them even doing what he said, contemplating all of these questions. "Tonight is a night no one is ever going to forget," Jack Winehouse said. "And tonight we will enforce the law." One of the police officers yelled, "Yes, Captain." "Tonight we will protect mankind," he said. "Yes, Captain," more officers chimed in this time. "Tonight we will be remembered," Jack said. To that the officers remained silent. They were thinking hard. The Dance of the Sun God. The eagle fished in his pocket and withdrew a joint. "I bet you can't grow this out of the ground, Mao." He sparked it up. Mao wasn't amused. He waved his arm at the eagle's feet. The ground opened up, and out came a marijuana plant that grew almost as tall as the eagle himself. It budded in seconds and smelled great. "Now that is a party trick," the eagle said, taking a hit off the joint and passing it to Heather. "Anything that grows, I can urge from the ground," Mao said. The eagle nodded. "I'm sorry I ever doubted you, man." He coughed. "Sobek, you in on this?" Sobek reached out his hand and took the joint from Heather. They all looked up at the full moon as they smoked. Even Mao took a hit. Ra was sitting on his throne dozing off. So if the cops are going to be here any second, don't you think I should have my guns ready? The eagle asked. Mao breathed out the smoke and passed the joint back to the eagle. You rely on primitive mortal weapons that badly? I do, the eagle said. Fine, Mao said. He opened up the entryway downstairs. Thank you, the eagle said. And he headed down the staircase. The speeder was still down there with all of his things. The eagle slid out the narrow entryway and armed himself to the teeth once more. When he came back up, he walked in on something unexpected. Ra was standing up, and it was the first time the eagle had seen him out of his throne. But something was off with him. His eyes were rolling in the back of his head, and his body was rigid, with his arms and legs spread out, palms pointed toward the sun. The rest of the gods were all standing around him, unsure what was happening. Ra began to shake like he was having a seizure, and the eagle thought they should lay him down and put something in his mouth. He'd read somewhere that was the protocol. But then, before he suggested it, Ra started moving back and forth. He was swaying, and he kept a serious expression on his face, and his palms pointed toward the sky. But he was swaying to a rhythm. He was dancing. Mao gasped and frantically started waving his arms over the ground. Out came a large drum and papyrus that he quickly stretched over the top. Mao really did make a drum quickly. By this time, Ra was really grooving. Mao's hands found a tempo, and the drum rumbled with low vibrations. Heather was tapping her foot. Now Ra was dancing back and forth. His eyes were closed and his face was pointing to the sun. His expression was serious too serious. The eagle couldn't suppress a little giggle at the ridiculousness of it all. Heather opened her mouth wide and started to chant, but the language was one that the eagle couldn't quite place. Even so, he felt like he knew the words she was about to say before she said them. Somewhere deep, deep down in his past, he himself had recited the same chant, and often. The feeling was powerful, connecting him to a past self from hundreds, maybe thousands of years ago. Ra was just going at it now. He skipped around and waved his arms to the beat of the drums. Mao was serious as ever, banging away. Heather kept chanting, growing louder and louder. There was no stopping it. The eagle looked over at Sobek, and the two of them awkwardly began to join the chant. Both of them were shocked at how easy it was to sing the words that moments ago they didn't know. It was almost spooky, ritualistic. Apophis! Ra shouted into the sky. Suddenly it all made sense. He wasn't dancing for fun. This was a ritual. Finally, Apophis had risen from wherever he'd been slumbering since the gods had been in captivity. Ra's dance was a celebration of time moving forward again. Whatever was coming was bringing with it a change so significant, the eagle was afraid nothing would ever feel the same again. The change was coming, and it would be coming that night. Propulsion. Out of all the rumbling came the head of the dragon. Seteth felt him, and they made eye contact immediately. Apophis rose from the core of the earth, and he grew ever so snake-like before the eyes of the god of chaos. Hello, old friend, Seteth mumbled, as if in a trance. The dragon blinked his eyes sleepily. I'm here, Seteth said. Apophis had placed his great head before Seteth, and he was waiting for him. His scales shined in the moonlight. His breath was hot. His eyes were eager, awaiting the god. Seth was suddenly entwined with the beast. He felt the need to tell him, I am yours. Apophis exhaled, and the hot wind from his nostrils came up all around Seteth. I am yours, Seteth said louder, and you are mine. The dragon bellowed and opened his jaws wide, showing Seth how many teeth he had. Seteth took a step forward, his right hand outstretched. Easy, Seteth said. Easy. Anubis stepped back. This was a magical moment that she did not want to interrupt. Seteth walked towards the head of the great beast, and he put one hand on his snout. Apophis shuddered at the touch. Hey, Setet said with confidence. I told you to be still. His words were coming from inside of him. He was flowing with the connection of his past selves. Seth? Anubis called out. Are you all right? Setet ignored her. He took another step forward, and he was just before the dragon. The sky above them was darkening. Setet let out a shout, and he pushed lightning from the center of his body into the ground. It was something that came natural to him at the moment. He was learning. The lightning lifted him above the ground and thrusted him onto the head of the dragon. Setet landed and steadied himself. He looked down at Anubis. Meet me at Amarna, he said. And that was it. Apophis began to lift into the sky. His head, with Setet on it, ascended from the ground level to the clouds in the time it would take someone to stand up. Setet's face and arms were scorched by the lashing wind, but Setet didn't care. He balanced well, and when he needed to, he clung to the dragon's scaly horns. They were airbound. Anubis looked up to the sky as the great dragon flew out of the earth. His golden, scaly body was like a snake, and for every second he flew above the ground, Anubis thought, this has to be the end. But it wasn't for a very long time. The sheer enormity of the beast blew Anubis's mind. When the tail finally came to a sharp end and the dragon exploded into the clouds with Setet riding his head, Anubis braced herself to follow them. She acted on instinct, putting her palms behind her face towards the sand. So she let the power flow through her arms and out of her palms, and sure enough, the force of the fire propelled her into the air. Like this, Anubis was able to follow the dragon in short bursts. She had to control her bursts so that her legs wouldn't break upon impact, but she was able to pull it off. She followed the dragon as Setet rode on his head. Sunspots. I'm worried, Sobek said. Worry is the word for weary warts, the eagle pointed out. Did you hear something? Heather interrupted. Mao moved to the edge of the ceiling of the fort. They're coming, he said. Ra was back in his throne. Let them come, Ra said. They did. The wave of police officers on speeders approached and lined up outside the fort. Keep your eyes watchful, Ra said. They will come from all sides. Ra clapped his hands together and a tiny ball of light appeared before him. It grew and grew until it was larger than a human body. It slowly drifted over the edge of the roof, aimed down on the wave of cops. My name is Police Captain Jack. The little sun bomb unleashed a solar flare down at him. Jack was prepared for this. He and his entire front line crouched behind metal shields. The beam hit them and reflected back into the desert. The shields became hot, but the police team had rubber gloves. They started pressing forward. Mao reached out his hands and urged vines to grow out of the floor beneath the police battalion. Their feet got caught in the vines, and they tripped and fell apart just like that. The sunbeam blasted through the first line of them, narrowly missing Jack Winehouse, and he retreated behind his own lines. 20 men were vaporized within an instant. Behind the gods, there was a scratching sound, and the eagle was lifted off the ground, his arms waving in a frenzy. The eagle turned around and found himself clenched against Michael's chest. His stomach dropped, and he watched his feet soar above the ground. Who the hell are you? The eagle asked, suddenly feeling his plan fall apart. Michael had no response. He flew the both of them upwards before the sunbeam could see them, and that's the exact moment when Sekhmet attacked. The modified Bastet had clawed its way up the back of the fort and now had leapt onto the ceiling. Mao pivoted and started drawing up a wall of vines around himself and Ra. Go! Jack Winehouse yelled, and they pressed on, throwing their grappling hooks up to the ceiling of the fort. Ignore the sun blindness. That is his power, Jack commanded. They began their ascent. In the sky, the eagle thrashed back and forth, trying to find some give in Michael's clutch. But it was impossible. Michael had his body subdued in a way that he was holding him, and the eagle couldn't do anything about it. Higher and higher they went, and the eagle made eye contact with his captor. His reed terrified him. Michael was just cold and perfect. He was more machine than man, and his hatred for gods was more than enough fuel for his crusade. The eagle understood instantly that Michael was his worst enemy, so he wiggled his body until he had one of his hand cannons out, and he pulled the trigger with the barrel aimed at Michael's skull. Ears ringing, the two of them fell backwards towards the ceiling of the fort, and as they did, Michael grappled with the eagle, and he took the gun from the eagle's hands and threw it out of reach. But the eagle had another gun already in his hands, and he fired 3 shots at Michael. All 3 missed, but at the very least, it had been enough for Michael to release his grasp. So the eagle fell back towards the ceiling of the fort, and he rolled upon impact and began to reload. Sekhmet was there, but Sobek was in front of her, baring his teeth. "Hey, wait," the eagle said. He fired 3 pot shots at the Queen Bastet. The sun orb turned around, and the eagle glanced over at Ra. He could see the god's eyes turning towards the horrific cat. Sekhmet dodged, and the sunbeam with ease, but it was thrown off, and Sobek had to reposition. The eagle, remembering the plan, turned and aimed his gun at Ra. Wham! Hather kicked him in the face. "You have to be..." Whack, whack! 2 more solid kicks to the face. Hather wasn't messing around. The eagle was distracted. "Give me some space." Setet was flying through the sky faster than he could comprehend. He balanced as well as he could, and as he did, he had to grasp onto Apophis' horns. "Where are we going, buddy?" he asked, knowing he would receive no answer. It was cold up there. They were ripping through the cloud line. Setet could see the Mesmir estate below him. He wanted to say, "Go that way, burn that one down." But he didn't really mean it. He was just letting the dragon take him wherever he wanted to go, and he had a sinking feeling that it was beelining to Ra. They took the Nile north, just as Ilion had taken Setet on their journey. Seth watched the land rush by, and he thought of Ilion. If only he could see him again. If only he could go back to how things were. But he knew that would never happen. In the pit of his stomach, he was finally understanding that he was different. He was a god. Apophis could see the fort before Setet's eyes were capable of seeing so far. The snake-like dragon breathed in deep and then let loose a burst of flames. It scorched the desert in a straight line, and then, when it approached the ashy ruins of Amarna, it scorched to that too. From Seth's vantage point, he was watching the world burn. "Hey," he said again, "what are you doing?" He felt connected to Apophis still, and he thought that he could communicate with him. "Please listen to me," Setet pleaded. "You don't have to kill the gods." Apophis stopped breathing fire and turned on a dime. This time he was riding upwards. Apophis was riding towards the sun. The sheer G-force of the maneuver knocked Seth down. He clambered across Apophis' skull and clung to his horns. "But if you need to kill a god, kill me," Setet said. They went up, and then Setet thought that they might go into space. And then they did. It happened so suddenly that Setet forgot to hold his breath. He saw Egypt beneath him, and then the whole planet. It was like a dream, but he knew that this was real. "My dreams have led me up to this," he thought. Setet held onto those horns for dear life, and he gagged, and his skin started to get really cold. But they kept going up, into space. They soared towards that full moon, and it looked magnificent. Apophis carrying them in his light, and Setet could understand he was being shown something. It was freezing, and the minimal moisture in Setet's pores were evaporating. Apophis knew it, and he took him much further out than Seth would have chosen. But before the god of chaos died, Apophis turned around and brought him back down. Bullseye. Jack Winehouse was the first one up the wall of the fort. His eyes had been blinded the whole climb, but he'd pushed through. And a lot of his companions did too eventually. Winehouse eyed the situation. Before the police captain, Ross stood up from his throne, and he began to grow. Ra's body mutated in front of Jack Winehouse. It was growing, multiplying in size, growing and growing. Ra's body doubled, then tripled in size, and there was a glow about him, as if there was a sun inside of him. Ra grew until the ceiling beneath his feet began to break, and then his feet crashed into the sand below him, kicking it up. Thunder roared, and suddenly in the sky there was the dragon Apophis. To Jack Winehouse, this was completely new information. Okay, he was hysterical, and he said it under his breath. I'm gonna need to see some ID, sir. On cue, Apophis roared. It split the entire world. He opened his mouth and let out another stream of fire. This one blazed the far side of the collapsing tree fort. Thankfully, Jack still had his shield, and he used it to block the inferno. Across the way, the eagle was fighting Heather. Above them, Michael was coming down. Not on my watch, Jack Winehouse said. He aimed and shot 4 direct hits into Michael and his wings. The leader of the NDO twirled in the air, missing the eagle, to land on the ground next to them. He looked around, trying to pinpoint what had hit him out of the sky. It was me, Jack Winehouse said to himself. Grow up. Mao watched Michael dive for the eagle. He'd seen the eagle betray them too, and a part of him wanted to let this new enemy kill the eagle. But instead, he focused on the flying god. Mao urged vines to grow from the ceiling and wrap around Michael's feet. Michael sliced them away with his sword. Mao pushed more out, and Michael sliced and sliced. Then, Michael blasted away. Mao was left reeling. He looked up, and Ra was enormous. The god of the sun was suddenly 20 feet tall, and he was emitting a glow. My lord, Mao exulted, you are all-powerful. Apophis was swiveling around in the sky and coming back, straight for Ra. Ra stood, epic in his form. Apophis belched, and then let out a blazing trail of fire. Ra pushed his hands toward it, and a barrier of sun power stood before him in the fire. The sun power shielded him from Apophis's attack. Webhead. Cleopatra was behind police lines with 2 handguns, taking careful aim and conserving bullets. She'd seen the first line meet its untimely demise, and was grateful that she'd stayed behind. But now she was feeling like she could be doing more. Especially after she saw Michael lift the eagle into the air and saw her husband successfully escape. At any rate, the sun flare that Ra had been focusing on to blind them all had disappeared after Ra had grown into a giant. But then, out of the corner of her eye, she saw another glint of the sun, and this time it was coming from behind the fort on top of a sand dune. Ilian, she said, getting his attention. Sniper! Ilian was there too, staying back with her, aiming and squatting behind one of the speeders. Okay, he said. I'm going for him. You want to come with? Cleo yelled over gunshots. No, but I will, Ilian said. They tucked their hands down and ran over the desert, looping around a row of trees for cover. It felt further than she'd thought. It was scary too, and every so often a rogue sunbeam would blast past them. Cleopatra didn't think Ra could focus on all the sunbeams at once. It seemed more like he was firing at random, down from the center of the fort. The dragon was high above them, breathing flames towards Ra, which could deflect and burst all over the place. The sniper was Oceanus. He was lying on top of a great sand dune so that he was just peeking over the top. He was a massive man, and his war paint made him look terrifying, but he had no idea they were coming. Let's flank him, Cleopatra commanded. I'm going the long way. She ducked behind the dune behind Oceanus, keeping him in sight. By the time she went around, Ilian was in position on the opposite side. They closed in. That's my husband you're aiming at, Webhead, Cleo said through gritted teeth. She fired 3 shots into him. Oceanus sprang up, taking the bullets in his right thigh. Both Ilian and Cleopatra were walking towards him, firing point blank. Oceanus whirled back and forth between them, knowing he'd been caught. They lit him up. Even some so big and powerful and scary was no match for their bullets. The big guys. Seteth was still balancing on Apophis' head. He wasn't controlling the dragon, not really, but he found that he was able to make suggestions. He kept the dragon aiming at Ra and tried his best to keep the flames away from the police below them. Apophis too had honed in on Ra, and Seteth could tell the great beast was angry. Apophis flew down to Ra, and the flames from his breath met Ra's main sunbeam, and they pushed against each other until Apophis was right there, face to face with Ra. They both roared. Seteth was in the hot seat, so to speak, and his skin was rippling with burns. Seteth roared too. Above them the storm was forming, and as Seth concentrated, so did the rolling thunder, and the lightning began to charge. Rain began to fall, which was a miracle for all of the cops that were on fire. Apophis put his big belly on top of the fort, almost smushing the eagle, who dodge-rolled away and kept fighting Heather. Apophis began to curl like a python around Ra, and for as much as Ra struggled, the snake dragon squeezed. It swirled around the sun god almost 4 times, completely encaging him. Without the use of his hands, Ra had no way of controlling the sunbeams. He screamed, and his low voice echoed against the thunder. Frenzy. Michael came down now, slashing with his sword from behind the eagle. Anubis had propelled her way into battle and honed in on him from a mile away. Round 2. As Michael came within inches of the eagle's back, Anubis vaulted over the top of the fort and blasted him with a jet of flames. The sheer force of them blasted the Angel of Death off course, and he spun off, crashing his shoulder into the ground. The eagle was still concentrating on Heather. They were kickboxing and messing each other up all kinds of ways. Both of them were bruised and bloodied, panting hard. Michael got back up, and Anubis hit him with a second jet of all her energy. He shielded himself with his wings. "Sekhmet, maim!" he yelled. The cat came barreling across the roof, finally ignoring Sobek. It leapt at Anubis, who pushed down into the ground with her flames and launched herself into the air. Sekhmet dove and missed her, and Sobek took his opportunity. Sobek bit into the machine cat's ankle and held on with his jaws. Enough, though, and the act lifted him off his feet. The cat sprang up and leapt off the edge of the fort in an attempt to shake him. It did. Sobek fell off somewhere between the ceiling and the fort and the soft dunes below them. Thankfully, he rolled with the fall and shook it off. Michael met Anubis in the air, and he was swinging his sword. Anubis, the god of war, dodged every swipe expertly and shot off another flame, sending him pinwheeling into the beast. The eagle landed a good thrust kick. He knocked Heather backwards, and he could tell she was winded by it. This was his chance. He looked up at Apophis, whose enormous jaws were wide open just above him, and he was focusing on crushing Ra. "Fuckity fuck," the eagle said. He was running for the dragon's open mouth. He leapt and grabbed onto one of the teeth the size of his torso. He wriggled himself up into the wet mouth, and he dodged the big lashing snake tongue. He plunged himself down Apophis' throat, and suddenly he was crawling, or kind of swimming, through saliva and hot acid. There was smoke in the eagle's lungs. He stayed low, holding his breath. The eagle's snake anatomy was no good, but he thought that he'd crawled beyond the part where he would swallow him. Now it was pitch black, and he was getting cramped in the dragon's throat. There were muscles on all sides of him, and below him an ember-like spark began to form. The eagle started firing. He worked his body around in a circle and shot one bullet for each clockwise rotation. His world began to shake. He just hoped he'd given the beast long enough time to immobilize Ra. There was no time to worry about that, though, because the eagle was sure he would suffocate soon if he didn't blast himself out. Apophis was in pain, and he started loosening his stranglehold. The eagles dropping guns down his throat as they ran out of bullets, and he was grabbing more and more guns from various places on his body to continue the barrage. Below him, the ember was growing, and the eagle barely had time to crawl through an open hole he'd made in the dragon's throat before a jet of flame came up, scathingly hot, just next to his face. He could tell the dragon was trying to expel him, but he thought he'd done enough damage to him. Maybe he needed one more good shot. The eagle crawled upwards now, back towards the mouth, but he was in the other side of the muscular throat, and he was going towards the brain. "Sorry about this, old-timer," the eagle said. He aimed beyond the great jaws and towards the brain. He opened fire. The lowest sound yet blasted through Apophis's busted throat, and in his anxiety, the dragon blasted upwards into the sky. The eagle rolled towards the mouth, and this time the teeth were gnashing. He rolled over the wet tongue and coughed up smoke. He slipped out of Apophis's mouth, and he was suddenly falling through the sky. "I didn't think this one through," the eagle mumbled. Ironically, Horus, the god of the sky, was suddenly tumbling past clouds, and the dunes below them were coming up fast. Just below him, Michael and Anubis were wrestling in the air. The eagle angled his body into a dive towards them. "Hiya, did you guys miss me?" he asked, grabbing onto one of each of their ankles. They both kicked in frustration, and the three of them started plummeting back towards the collapsed ceiling of the fort. The death of Ra. Ra was completely dazed, gasping for breath, but he was still alive. Apophis had flown into the air and then fallen into a great crater below him, crushing several police officers. The sun god looked around, using his hands to block the cops' barrage of bullets, which felt like fire ants to him. "You dare defy Ra!" he screamed down at them. There were only so many of them left. But Sekhmet had climbed back up the wall of the fort, with Sobek stuck to her back leg again, hanging by his mouth. Sekhmet leapt up and dug her jaws into Ra's jugular. A geyser of blood erupted from the artery, raining down on the gods fighting below them. This did Ra in. His great body stumbled and he fell, crashing down what was left of the front wall of the fort. Ma fell to his knees and cried out, "My lord!" The eagle had one gun left. He aimed and hit Mao on the shoulder. "Betrayer!" Mao shouted back at him. Yeah. The eagle aimed again. Alliance. Seteth had dismounted just before Apophis crashed into the sand dunes. If the god of chaos had been a second off, his legs would be broken. But he was able to leap free of the dragon and conjure a lightning blast beneath him to slow his impact. The police officers, who had very little idea of what was actually happening, took aim at Seth. "Not today, pigs," Seteth mused, blasting lightning behind him to propel himself up to the fort, as Anubis had done with her fire. Up there, everyone was on the verge of fainting, they were so tired. But Michael pushed the tempo, still bloodthirsty as ever. His mechanical heart kept pumping, and his blade flew this way and that, slicing Anubis in the arm. "Fuck you," Seth said. He thrusted his arms forward, and a beam of light knocked Michael not off the fort, but through it, and a little bit into the sand below their feet. Hather and Mao were holding each other up. Sobek was in the distance, rolling in pain on the ceiling. Sekhmet was still pulling veins out of Ra's neck like spaghetti. "Truce!" the eagle yelled. Anubis looked down, wild-eyed, waiting to kill Michael once and for all, but he'd been blasted out of her field of vision. Seteth, Anubis, Mao, Sobek, Hather. "It's over," the eagle said, "but we're all going to die if we don't kill that cat and the angel." Mao nodded. Hather, who had been recently kicked by the eagle, grunted. Sobek pulled himself up. "Hey, Seth," the eagle said. Seteth, overwhelmed with emotions, and all of them almost dying moments ago, looked at the eagle wildly. "Hey," he said back. They didn't know what else to say. "Group up," Anubis commanded. The six of them formed a circle on the roof, with their backs to each other. When Sekhmet was satisfied with Ra's corpse, she jumped down towards them, teeth bared. Some of the wiring was exposed on her back leg where Sobek had been gnawing. Seteth and Anubis aimed their elemental fury into that weak spot, and the enormous cat fell, finally still amid the bullets and thunder and heavy rainfall. Michael flew back and alighted on the edge of the roof. He saw all of them, and he knew he couldn't take them all. "I'll be back," he said, panting, "and you are all going to pay for what happened here." The eagle unloaded his last bullets in his direction, and Michael backflipped off the roof and flew low, dodging to avoid Seteth and Anubis' aim. Still, Seth sent lightning after him, and Michael had to fly as fast as he could to escape. Brother in arms. "Where is Jack Winehouse?" the eagle asked. The eagle was dripping from head to toe with Apophis' blood and guts. "Does anyone have a towel?" Mao reached up his hands and drew out a papyrus plant. He strung it into a towel. "You are just a gem, you know that? I'm sorry about your shoulder, by the way," the eagle said. Mao shrugged. "We were at war," he said. The eagle nodded and wiped fiercely at his whole body. "Guys," Seteth called them over. Jack was in bad shape. Seteth was crouched over his body, and Seteth was holding his hands over a bloody wound in Jack's belly. The police captain was shaking and coughing up blood. Mao created another papyrus-based towel, and Seteth wrapped it around the wound and tied it tight. "Oh no," the eagle said, crouching down too. Jack Winehouse tried to speak, and a trickle of blood dribbled from the side of his mouth. "Medic! We need a medic up here!" the eagle called down the side of the fort. By now, the police had stopped shooting, and they were all clambering up the stairs. The eagle held out his arms as a sign of peace as they came up. All of the gods were standing there over Jack's body. A team of paramedics rushed forward, and Mao made them a stretcher. "Mesmer, child," Jack said, as if he was delirious. Seteth was there. "I'm here," he said to Jack. "I've been so worried about you," Jack said. "You protected me," Seteth said, finally understanding that Jack had been around the whole time, against the NDO. He took Jack's hand, and the man's breathing was harsh and abnormal. "Please," he asked Seteth, "don't use your power for evil." Jack Winehouse breathed one last time, and then he was out like a light. The paramedics had a defibrillator, and they pressed it against his chest. They cleared it and shocked him. Blood splattered out of the makeshift tourniquet. One medic checked his watch. Time of death, 5:37 a.m. Dawn was breaking. It was a new day for everyone, except Jack Winehouse. Reunion. Cleopatra and Ilion rushed up the stairs and took in the scene. The eagle ran to her immediately and gave her the sloppiest hug. Then both of them, covered in blood and gore, kissed in the rain. As Seteth mellowed, the thunder relented. "Look at you," Ilion said upon seeing Seteth. The last time he'd seen him, he had been riding Apophis. Seteth collapsed into him and they hugged. "You came back for me?" Seteth cried. Ilion sniffed and his body got goosebumps. "Yeah, kid. Always." Anubis watched them and was moved to tears as well. She longed for a connection like that. She thought maybe with Ra gone she could develop one. But in the meantime, she stood stoically, taking it all in. When Ilion and Seteth pulled away, Cleopatra came up to Seteth and hugged him too. Seteth hugged her back and then made a face when he saw all the blood she'd transferred over to him. "Don't go so far away again, Seth," Cleo said quietly. Epilogue. Gabriel Mesmer was deep in the crypt. His scepter was guiding him, and he was moving in a trance. "Ancestors," he called into the darkness. The scarab beetles scattered around beneath his feet and on the walls all around him. Those torches on the walls flickered. He never did find out what kept those torches lit. Another scratching sound came, and this time it was more than the beetles. The scratching was coming from inside of the coffins. Gabriel Mesmer narrowed his eyes, and his dark scepter shone bright red. He pulled at one of the coffins and opened the lid just a crack. Sure enough, the body inside, mummified as it was writhing around, its fingers scratching bloody on top of a coffin. Gabriel closed the lid again, his heart racing. "Not yet," he said to the resurrecting corpses, "but soon."